Hi, my name is Jeff Butterworth and I'm a naturopath, and I've spent the last 25 years helping women with hormonal imbalances. Now, I've heard some incredible stories both ways of how hormones have impacted women's lives, and I wanted to do a series where women could tell their story so that other women can take power from that and understand that they're not alone, and understand that there are real solutions that they can do themselves to take back control of their hormones. So join me and a whole range of wonderful women telling their story on hormonal imbalances. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for joining our new Happy Healthy You podcast series on women telling their story. So welcome.
Very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's really important because there's so many stories out there, literally thousands and thousands of stories of women that have been through so much like you, and your story, particularly around PCOS, which we're going to talk about today, Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome. And we want to do this series to really let women see that they're not alone, and particularly these success stories like you of where you've been and how you've managed to learn and all the things that you've implemented to now be able to lead a much more productive life and happy life and all those things. So.
Yes, for sure. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay. So I always like to start sort of right in the middle and unfortunately it's the middle because it should be the start around your diagnosis. So can you tell me a little bit about how long it took to get a diagnosis and what was the actual process for that, for this polycystic ovarian syndrome?
Well, I was probably diagnosed around 20. Leading up to that, I had really sporadic periods from about 14 perhaps. Maybe one or two a year, really heavy, would last weeks and weeks. Didn't really know if that was normal or not. I knew that it probably wasn't as I got a little bit older, as you know, you do life ed and you start hearing about you should be having a period every month and that they should only last, 5 days or something like that. So I knew that there was something going on. From 14 to 20 is probably way too long to be diagnosed because it was pretty horrific. No teen should have to bleed for 4 weeks, take time off school. It was pretty horrific, really. And then at about 20, I started seeing some doctors. I just wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on. Started seeing some specialists and had some tests and, found out through scans and things that I had polycystic ovaries, quite severely too.
So that was, let's say, 6 or 7 years. What was your relationship with your mother? It's a strange one to ask, but was this something you had to go through yourself, or was it something that you were both learning and discovering?
Probably in the teenage years, I think I was probably doing it alone. Not saying that, it was anything against mum. It was really, we were quite a private family, so it wasn't really talked about a lot or anything like that. So I would just deal with it. When I was starting to get diagnosed, mum was great. I went to some big meetings that they had, which was quite confronting for us both, because they had a lady that was speaking who had a beard, just about. And I was only just diagnosed, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, oh my God, I'm about to grow a beard. This lady was quite dark, and obviously, the darker you are, the more obvious it is. I'm very fair, so, but it was quite frightening. The information, it wasn't the doctor diagnosed me and he said, you're never going to be able to have kids. That was my diagnosis. You've got polycystic ovaries and it's severe, you'll never have children. And basically, here's some information, and I was on my own. That was it. So I went to this meeting, got a little bit of information, not a lot. I just think I was focused on, the hair side of things more than really, the fertility or the, all the range of symptoms, and the range of symptoms are huge. So it was quite confronting at 20, yeah.
It's interesting. If I look back now, you're 43 at the moment.
Yeah, 43.
Yeah, 43. So we're back.
Don't rub it in.
No, it's a fantastic age to be. But going back 23 years, and I remember even further back when I first started practicing, polycystic ovarian syndrome really was not a condition at all. So there's two parts to that. One is it wasn't as common back then. So in the last 25, 30 years, there's been a massive acceleration of the condition. But there's also been a lot more awareness around what is the condition and so forth. So we've got a situation back then where you don't know what's going on, which is very common. Teens.
It was awful, really.
Your mother doesn't know what's going on because she's obviously not had that condition. And then you've got a situation where the doctors really don't know what's going on, still to a certain degree don't understand the full pathology of what's happening in PCOS. So it must be such a daunting situation to be in as a teen, where you're very vulnerable in terms of, you know, developing who you are and wondering about the future, and then the doctors just drop the bombshell on you, you're never going to have children again. Tell me a bit more about that.
And it became consuming, I think, you know, like on my mum's side of the family, there are definitely fertility issues. Each of them, going back to my grandma, have all had either trouble conceiving or trouble keeping babies. So, I mean, as you said, there hasn't really been much information about it. So whether they possibly had polycystic, we don't know. But I definitely ticked a lot of the boxes when I sort of started to do some of the homework. It's really hard. I don't think you should just be told something and given some paperwork and basically said, off you go, work it out yourself. Like, it would have been really nice to have a GP or somebody sort of hold your hand and, you know, guide you through it a little bit. But even now, when you talk to doctors and things, they really just don't. I don't really know enough about it even now. There's such a broad range of symptoms and things that go together with it, but, you know, not all of us have the same symptoms, the same conditions that sort of link polycystic. It's, you know, I might have something, but you don't. So it's been very hard, and it really did consume a lot of my 20s of, you know, being put on the pill. No, that one didn't work, so let's try another one. I think I was on 7 or 8 pills in as many years, which was, now I'm furious about that, but I don't think anyone really knew anything different.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're in the same situation where there's thousands of young girls, as we speak now, going through exactly the same thing. So the current model is, you figure out you've got some symptoms, go on a certain element of discovery yourself, go to a GP. It's a 10-minute consultation. You might get a diagnosis, but often there's many, many GPs before that. Then you may even end up with a gynecologist or a specialist.
So many. Yeah. And my specialist was a male that was no bedside manner, that really didn't know how to connect with a 20-year-old girl in there by herself. So really, I think, kind of felt uncomfortable, which made me feel uncomfortable. So I didn't ask any questions, and the story begins.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a common cold here or some minor ailment. These are significant life-changing conditions and symptoms that you're suffering from at an extremely vulnerable age. So the lack of care and support systems that currently exist really frightens me. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing these podcasts and series now, is to educate young women on what is the right path to walk down and what are your options, really, to kind of demystify everything that you've been through sitting here now at 43, that understand that. But, you know, my heart goes out to these young girls that are sitting there at the moment that are just completely in despair and a misunderstanding. And the communities we manage, that's just such a common theme of despair, misunderstanding what's going on, misinformation, a medical model that is not working for these conditions as well, that often make the situation worse. So it really is a bad situation to be in, but thankfully you've come through it. And we can talk a bit about.
I'm going into the next phase soon. I think I'm on the other end, you know, in another few years. But I mean, look, I have a 12-and-a-half-year-old daughter. I would be horrified for her to have to go through, you know, what I've been through, what women, girls are still going to have to go through, you know. And more often than not, unfortunately, the pill is, you know, that's the answer to everything with polycystic. And I really just don't think it is. It's just masking all of your symptoms.
The pill can be, for some women, a great option to manage the symptoms. But when you say the be all and end all, it really is the one of very few options. You know, you have the pill, there's metformin and maybe antidepressants. So this is where, from a holistic perspective, and we'll get into that later, is it's a syndrome. It's not just a hormonal condition. It's not just an emotional condition. It's not just a physical. There's all these things going on. So when young women understand that, they can start to treat it from a very much a holistic perspective. And, you know, I know, because I've seen it hundreds of times, that it can be done that way. But young women and the medical profession haven't seen that either. So they really don't know what they're dealing with here. So
it just needs to be in conjunction, I think, you know, in conjunction with learning about the syndrome and, you know, definitely steps that you can take, as well as doing that, because I'm not saying that it is necessarily the wrong way to go, because I think it probably helped a little bit through those years, but I think you need to be educated first before you're just given, you know, medication that you maybe don't always know what the side effects are or what it's doing to your body.
Yeah, and that goes with all conditions, is understanding what are those fundamental factors that's happening in our body. And just through society, we tend to give away the responsibility of our health to our healthcare professional, but really it should be flipped. And, you know, we ultimately in control of our health and well-being, and we have to educate ourselves. So that's part of what we're doing here. So tell me a little bit more, because you mentioned before how PCOS, there's many different symptoms that affect people in many different ways. Tell me a bit about the symptoms that you were suffering earlier on and potentially even now struggling with.
Obviously the biggest sign for me was my periods. Mm-hmm. I knew once I worked out that wasn't normal. I think that was the main thing that you know, kick-started me to try and work out what was going on. I'm very up and down with my weight. It takes a lot for me to lose weight. I'm that classic apple shape, which is, you know, well known with polycystic. It's, you know, weight on the front, really hard to shift.
Yeah.
As I said, I am quite fair, but my hair grows really quickly. So, you know, just trying to keep on top of that so that, you know, you feel confident and comfortable in yourself, I think is probably a big one. But look, I've had hormonal skin, hormones up and down, which I think growing up, you know, parents or yourself, you say, you know, well, I'm a teenager or whatever it is, you can blame your hormones on, you know, a range of different things. And when I look back now, like I can really see that it really started when I was early teens with my hormones. It sort of was a little bit a lot all over the place, my mum would like to tell you. And just, you know, as I'm getting older, you know, still now, like anyone, just now that I know my body a little bit more, I can understand it a little bit more. Dieting doesn't necessarily work for someone with polycystic ovaries. I think you need a very healthy diet. I'm not insulin resistant, but I know that when I eat less carbs and sugar and things like that the body works better, feels better. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's a learning curve, that's for sure. Yeah. Forever learning.
And hormones, apart from the physical side of things, are really powerful modulators of mood. Obviously, most teenage girls, as they're first starting to get their cycle, go through different mood swings and stuff. But with PCOS, it can be amplified. Tell me a little bit about
extreme. It's extreme. My mum should be sitting here with us, Jeff. Yeah, highs, lows, a lot of trouble just, you know, maintaining a normal behavior, I guess it is. Yeah. And it started, you know, I'd probably say around 13, but it really peaked, I'd say sort of 14, 15, 16, like irrational, really irrational. And as I said, I've got a 12-and-a-half-year-old, and I can even just see the difference between her and I at that age. You know, she's quite level-headed, you know, can make rational choices, whereas I was just all over the place. And, you know, it's taken a long time, probably also because I was on and off pills and with fertility treatment. It's been a really up and down situation, like, emotional life.
But it runs deeper than that, and we can kind of laugh, as we do in society, we tend to laugh off mood swings and women's emotional aspects. But when you're in this, let's say your moods are going everywhere, you really feel as if you're out of control, that impacts on when you're at school, your ability to concentrate. It impacts on your relationships with girlfriends, with boyfriends and everything along that. It interacts with relationships with your family. And what I can see is that these are very formative years in so many different ways. And do you feel that impacted on, it obviously impacted on them, but do you feel that carried through into your life in terms of the
110%? I was hard work, really hard work. Like I can really, it probably took till I was married at 26 or 27 to really look back and realize what a hard time that I put my family through. Like, you know, just totally irrational about things and highly emotional. I am still a highly emotional person, but it is, you know, much more controlled now. But just it's going from one extreme to the other in one conversation, really, you know, like very hard to, it's been tough. It has been really tough.
And I suppose if there's younger women or any women listening to this now, it's important to understand that this is not you, right? Hormones are extremely powerful mediators of mood. Yes, you might be an emotional person, but that doesn't mean you need to be hard work. So what happens is we get confused between hormones and personality, and they're two very different things. And we've all seen, you know, beautiful young kids before hormones kick in turn into just monsters, and it's not them.
Yes.
What I want to try and get across here for anyone listening, and even to you, is there's no blame. If you can understand the physical nature of hormones on your mental state, then that blame game changes, and how everyone around you deals with you changes as well. And there's a level of empathy that comes into that, and it goes right through society into the workplace and everything. And at the moment, there is zero understanding really of the impact of hormones and on your mood and the interpersonal relationships. And I think that's a discussion that we have to have, and we should have been having for the last 50 years, but it's just not happening.
No, I mean, my husband can vouch for, you know, we've been together for about 20 years, and through those first years, like sobbing over things that I didn't even know why I was sobbing, you know, why was I so happy about something 1 minute and just, you know, could be so overwhelmed about something else. And that's not, I am, as I said, an emotional person and very in touch with my emotions and feelings, but erratic, you know, really erratic mood swings. That would just be, and then if I was on the pill and trying to come off the pill, you know, again, you're then dealing with a whole new range of emotions and feelings and hormones, which, you know, is probably the first half of our relationship, the poor guy. But it's true, it really does affect everything about your life, everything about yourself, how you feel about yourself, the self-esteem, all of those things.
Yeah. And I go right back to what I said. We're not dealing with just a simple condition like a flu or anything like this. These are life-changing conditions that, again, we need to be talking about, and people need to understand that if they've got a young daughter that's just been diagnosed with PCOS or any sort of serious hormonal condition, they're in the league of being diagnosed with a cancer. I know they're not life-threatening, but they're life-changing.
Life-changing. And the thing with polycystic is there's so many different layers that go with it. It's not just here's a diagnosis. It has an effect on physical, mental, you know, hormonal, like it is every part of your system, your life that is affected by this, you know, diagnosis or this condition. So, yeah. And you imagine if you knew then what you know now in terms of how to manage your hormones. Can you imagine, would that have changed your life in any particular way? I definitely think so. And I think just if I knew a little bit more about it, and that there are different options to just maybe one or two. I don't know whether my daughter has it or not. I pray that she doesn't, but I am going into her teenage years with a open mind and trying to be very, not just open, but trying to be understanding of, you know, each step. Or is she having a emotional situation because she's 12, or is it more than that? I'm just trying, we're sort of trying to guide through this together. Definitely trying to be super open about things. She knows a little bit about it, but obviously I don't want to frighten her and change the way she thinks about herself in case, you know, she gets this. At this stage, it's looking better than it did for her than it was at my age, when I was her age. So just trying to keep open mind. And I know a couple of people that have it, but again, like, their symptoms are so different as well that I don't even have anyone else to show her, look, even if you do have it, you may not end up like me or go through what I've been, because, you know, your symptoms could be completely different, or you may not have any. And
there's differing, as you said, differing degrees, but also it's about how you manage the condition early. You know, and if you can start to, as these symptoms start to pop up, and identify what are these underlying factors, and working with a diet from a young age, and letting her understand what's happening in her body and how her choices in terms of diet and lifestyle impact on her hormones. These are really valuable lessons she will carry through the rest of her life. But it took you until you were 40 odd until you really sort of started to understand that. So,
and I think also, you know, wanting to care about myself a bit more too, about what I'm putting into my body. What am I happy with what I've been doing? Am I happy having, you know, some artificial things inside my system, or going natural, or whatever it is? I think as you get a bit older, instead of your mum telling you what to do, or just doing what everyone else is doing, or whatever it is, you know, you do get to a stage, and unfortunately it did take me till I was, you know, 40 to kind of start really caring about, you know, my body and what I was putting in it. So better late than never.
Yeah, but again, if we could have some programs in school where we can let teens have that information, then let them make that choice. And I find these days, you know, I know my nieces, for example, have had hormonal issues, and they are very open to a healthy lifestyle, and it's become a lot more trendy. And so, you know, I think the younger generation are probably a bit more prepared, but they just need to have that information, particularly in and around PCOS.
And easily accessible, and is mum or dad going to help facilitate that? You know, you might have an idea of what you want to do, but, you know, if mum's making pizza every night, it's going to be hard to, you know, I think you have to be really open with your parents, siblings, whoever it is. And I guess it is a hard thing for teenagers to talk about. You know, they don't necessarily want to sit down with mum and have the big chat about what's going on. So I think if you can try and keep it open, and, you know, that will definitely a better age and a better era and generation to be going through this, because, as you said, there's more information, more people are talking about it, more willingness to, you know, make changes in their lives. So I hope for my kids or their kids that it will be not so unusual and not so unheard of.
And, you know, maybe we need a system of mentoring as well, where women like you that have been through this you can be talking to other teens about your experience, so you're not having to speak to your mum about it, which can be a little bit difficult. So there's got to be solutions. So we'll see what we can do, because we've got these huge big communities, but we're not really leveraging them enough for teens. And we've got teen groups, but, you know, teens are not that interested in Facebook and those kind of things. So we need to think more about how can we make this kind of information accessible and consumable for teens. So
definitely. I mean, it's one thing talking to your mum about it, isn't it, than talking to somebody else that might be open to it.
Now, this is certainly not the end of your story. Let's move on now to what consumed a big part of your life, which is, as happens in a lot of people, and this is part of the issue with PCOS and fertility, is obviously it got to a point where you're looking to have children, and if we're still in this phase where you're on the pill and you're very much entrenched in the medical system, do you want to tell us a little bit about that journey towards having your children?
Sure. Most exciting and heartbreaking stages of our lives, I think. Knew at 20, as we said, that I was going to have some issues. not sure exactly where along the line I got told that, you know, if you really are going to try and have kids, you should probably have them before you're 30. Not every late 20s person is ready to have kids, you know, straight away. But we definitely knew that it was what we wanted to do. So we stopped using any protection, went off the pill. Nothing was really happening, which we kind of thought that would be the case. Lots of different doctors, lots of different specialists, went through lots of different tests, ended up going to see an IVF specialist who thought that we might be okay. Well, first we did Clomid for probably about 2 years. I should say that first, because that is a hardcore, that's a hardcore drug.
Yeah.
I actually thought I was going to have to be institutionalized at some stage.
On top of already existing hormonal mood swings.
Oh my goodness. And the way that they did it is they put me on the pill to have a cycle. Then they put me on Clomid, and this went on and off every month for 2 years. It was really, really hard. Like mentally, I'm surprised that we even got through that. But when we decided that, we did actually have a miscarriage on that. One of the, probably about 4 or 5 months into it. And so we were excited that it had worked, but then we just could not get pregnant again. And so there just came to a point where I cannot physically, mentally do this anymore. So that's when we went to see an IVF specialist who thought that we should try IUI first. We did a couple of cycles of that and got pregnant, which again, it was quite hormonal and it was pretty hard going. But anyway, had my daughter, but then trying to get pregnant again was really hard. I'd put on a lot of weight. I think the fertility drugs had really, I was really struggling to lose that baby weight afterwards. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard. I think we had 5 or 6 cycles of that. And again, with all the hormones and everything, I just had to have a break. Decided to go and see a Asian Fertility Acupuncture, just to give the body a bit of a, break and everything. And I was off the pill, I was off everything, and managed to have 2 natural periods within probably a 4 or 5 month time with this lady. So went back, had some more IUI, and then had my son. So it was a very, up and down. It was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah. And you're putting...
we had the kids.
Yeah. But you're putting a really brave face on it as...
It was emotional, heartbreaking. I always wanted to get my period, but then you get your, period after a cycle, and just devastating, absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
So look, now we've been through it. I guess I've sort of blocked it out a little bit because it was so traumatic. Yeah. But I have my 2 kids, and it was really tough. But I think it probably could have been made a little bit easier without all the hormones. But look, in the end, it did what it needed to do for us. Yeah. So I can't say that how we got there was wrong, even though there's a lot of it I now look back and think, why did we do that? Or why did I allow that to go on for so long? Or you put your trust, I guess, in different doctors and things. But look, the IVF specialist was absolutely brilliant and actually specializes in polycystic. So she was horrified that I kept being put on the pill, to get taken off it, to have another drug to combat that.
Exactly. And it just shows a complete misunderstanding of what the pill does.
Correct.
And when you came off the pill the first time, did you have any major side effects or withdrawals? Because of the different hormones and because I was on a lot of different pills over the time, I think my deciding factor only a couple of years ago to finally get off it was I did think that it was stabilizing or normalizing my hormones and my emotions and things, but I was starting to get very, very dark, that sort of lead up to getting my period, quite emotionally, just very in my head, I think it was,
look, I say suicidal, but obviously I would never go down that track. But the thoughts could be quite dark leading up to, you know, getting my period. And so in the end, I knew that it wasn't necessarily, it had done its job. And then, you know, jumped to just a couple of years ago and doing a lot more research and being part of your Facebook pages and things like that, where it's sort of teaching women about your hormones and the pill and all of those sort of things. I really made the decision that, you know, enough was enough. I just really needed to be natural, work out what was going on before I get to the next side of things where we're talking about menopause and those things. I really needed to feel like I was in control of my body, my hormones. I needed to know if I was going to be okay without being on the pill. I needed to know if my mental state was going to be okay, if I could cope with it. Honestly, it's been the best thing.
Well, see, I'm certainly not anti the pill as a treatment option for PCOS. And if we go right back to, we're talking about this integrated approach between the holistic options and the medical options. And I think for some women, it can be, for a period of time, a good way just to manage their symptoms whilst they're potentially implementing more holistic options in managing the syndrome. Correct. Totally. But I keep talking about these sliding door moments, and if you had that knowledge you do now back before you started to look at IVF and you started to look at more natural options to regulate your cycle naturally, like you said, for example, the acupuncture and if you were able to conceive naturally, and a lot of women, was chatting to a woman yesterday that did exactly that without the IVF, you can imagine the harder, you just talked about how devastating and traumatic that period of life was. If you could have had that information back then, it could have saved yourself so much. And I'm not saying it would have worked for sure, but I say if you can first at least try those natural options first to save yourself potentially that trauma, then you can go into the IVF. But that really
and save yourself some money too, Jeff.
Well,
let's be serious.
Yeah. But
you don't worry about that once you've had your kids. But 100%. 100%. Look, I'm with you. I think each product, each drug has a place. And even as a teenage girl, perhaps, for contraceptive reasons, if you are unsure about those sorts of things too, the pill definitely has its place. And I wouldn't say throughout the last 20 odd years that I would never have taken it, because I think I probably would. Looking back, I probably would, but it would have been really nice to have that with a whole heap of information on what does the pill do to you? 7 pills in 7 years. I mean, that's looking back now, that's crazy. You're not even really giving it a chance really either.
Yeah.
And then Diane 35 is often the recommended pill for polycystic ovaries, and yet it's starting to be, from what I can understand, it's not available in certain countries now because it's had some issues. So I think we all need to make sure that you're just given enough information and let you decide, instead of saying, look, take the pill, it's going to fix everything. It'll, help combat all your side effects and whatever else. Maybe you should be saying, look, this is an option, but there are so many other options, or something. Look, I'm just a person, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a specialist, but I would have liked to have had a lot more information about what it's perhaps doing to my body, or, whatever else.
And be aware, like, for example, the pill is very closely linked, particularly in teens, with anxiety, depression, and all these aspects as well. So you're thinking you've got all this stuff going on, you're bordering on suicidal, when there's a very high probability that something that you're putting in your mouth is a medication. So understanding that.
Correct, because now that I've been off it, I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
So, whether it was all the years of being on and off and up and down and the fertility treatment and, just being a hormonal teenager or whatever it is, I'll never know what made what worse. But now that I'm in my 40s and I'm more aware of what's going on, now that I've finally come off it, often they give the pill, like, with the heavy bleeding. That's why I went back on it after having my son 9 years ago, because my bleeding was so heavy, and that was the way to fix it. Oh, well, go back on the pill, you'll be fine, you can manage it that way. You can just keep skipping it, just keep skipping your period, and then you don't have to deal with it. which I guess has its own issues as well. But, you know, now that I think I went off it maybe a couple of years ago. Actually, I did. I went off it in the first lockdown, which may or may not have been the smartest thing that I've ever done. But, you know, now more balanced, you know, I feel like I'm more balanced. And if I'm having whatever thoughts, I know that it's a normal thought because I'm having a bad day, not so much because of what's inside of my body.
And unfortunately, for any serious hormonal condition, one of the underlying pathologies is women don't metabolize hormones well. So that's one of the reasons why these conditions develop in the first place. So their liver and their digestion are not breaking down and excreting those hormones well. So it's genetic, and there's also dietary and lifestyle elements. So when you put the pill on top of that, it's putting a lid on things, a band-aid, but it's actually contributing to the long-term pathology of what's going on. So it's very much that sort of band-aid approach. And that's where, you know, it's an option for people that don't want to look at the larger syndrome effects and why these syndrome effects are happening in terms of diet and lifestyle. But if you then start to then look at why is this actually happening in my body and start to treat that, then you don't need to put that band-aid on there because your symptoms start to resolve.
But this is what it is. This is often what, you know, GPs do. You go for a reason and they just give you a band-aid, you know, to just put on whatever your issue is, instead of like digging deeper, you know, why is this happening? Why is, you know, even if you go for a blood test and, you know, something comes back unusual or whatever it is, I don't always necessarily dig deep to find out the cause of what is, you know, why is that happening? The band-aid effect, it's 100%.
Well, and it's not the GP's fault, it's because there's just that fundamental misunderstanding in terms of conventional medicine, what's actually happening in the body. And if I digress slightly, HRT and menopause is a good example. Is we're giving women estrogen and progesterone as HRT, but the body's actually turning those hormones off for a reason and moves into an alternate hormonal system. The medical profession just don't understand that very fundamental transition that happens. And when it comes to PCOS, they don't understand really the fundamental syndrome of what's happening in terms of the blood sugar dysregulation and the hormonal imbalances there. So they're understanding a little bit now with metformin, but so it's not the GP's fault. And there's a fundamental misunderstanding in the conventional medical system about hormones. And third, there's no real research happening in this area. So you've got 20%.
Which is so sad.
No, you've got 20% of women now with PCOS, 20%.
Oh,
so
really?
A fifth of the female population is suffering from this. But there's no real funding going into this. It's starting, but...
And so we're all just walking around like with no knowledge, just feeling like we're alone and that no one understands how we're feeling, or why do we look this way, or why do we, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it was interesting when you said about the HRT, because when I went to the doctors a few years ago saying, look, I've got all these symptoms, apart from having polycystic, you know, I'm hormonal, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. Could it be perimenopause or whatever? Her reaction was to put me on antidepressants. And I said, I don't want antidepressants. I'm just wondering, I didn't even really know what the symptoms of menopause really were. Like, you know, I've read about a few things and I've heard about a few things, but some of my things were so random. My symptoms were so random that I was struggling to put them all together. And for her, just no information. It literally was, I can give you a mild dose of antidepressants. And I just said to her, honestly, I said, that's not what I'm here for. You know, I just wanted some information. It would be nice to be just given some information, whether she can hand it to me or she can give me some websites or whatever it is. But I just walked out of there with no information, no help, wasn't really sure, you know, I didn't want to go on antidepressants because I didn't feel depressed. Yeah. I just didn't want to feel, you know, I was having the hot moments. And all of those other things, but anyway.
And it is such a minefield. And I was speaking to some women late last year, and it kind of dawned on me. They said, you know, they were entering into that perimenopausal, menopausal phase, and they said, our discovery route is we start to get these symptoms and we don't know what's going on. So we go to our GP, we spend 10 minutes with them, and they offer either antidepressants or hormones. So that's there. They may go to a holistic practitioner, which often will push them in the right path. But again, it's only a short time frame that they spend with that practitioner. They then try and go online, which is just a minefield of information.
Dr. Google,
figure anything out. Or they talk to their girlfriends. Now, which is still a very valuable thing, but it's hardly a great way to manage any sort of condition. And this is with hormones, but for other health conditions, there seems to be a lot more structured path that happens in terms of diagnosis. And you just mentioned there before it was 6 or 7 years before you were able to get a diagnosis, and it's often a lot longer for people as well. So there's just this complete disconnect for women in terms of diagnosis, information, where do I go? And again, this is part of what we're trying to do here with our communities and our information in these kind of podcasts, is just to give people a starting point and some real information that they can potentially go away and research and figure it out for themselves.
Some of it's the embarrassment factor too, a little bit. You know that you've only got 10 minutes with the doctor, and do they really care? Do I really want to talk about my periods and all those things? There's a lot of layers to all of this, isn't there?
Yeah, but we're 25, 30 years down the line with PCOS, and there's very little funding going on. So things have got to change. And again, this is one way, women talking, being part of the solution rather than the problem. So if anyone listening here, please be proactive in talking about it with your girlfriends, if it's just that, because we've got to destigmatize hormonal imbalances. And
don't give up. Don't give up. Your health is too important to just, ignore it or not. If you don't get the right answer or what the answer that you're wanting from someone, whether it's the GP or whoever it is, I think you really have to just keep knocking on the doors, keep doing research, keep, as you said, talking to people, because you will find out that there is a little elite group of us, or, you will get somewhere or some answers. Look, it might take months, years, hopefully it won't take 20 odd. But, the more that you get into it, you definitely will start finding some answers. One
of my favorite quotes is, if you don't look, you will not see. So it's very much that you have to go on that journey, and it's almost it is an education and a study. You've got to teach yourself, and hopefully you can find good practitioners, good support groups that allow you to learn and educate yourself on what's happening. So that's actually a really good segue for us into what you get hit 40, you've been through all this heartache that you'd never wish on anyone. But there is a redemption story around this. Do you want to tell us about how you're feeling now and what you've managed to do to take back some control?
Yeah, definitely. So, I went to the doctor, was feeling a little bit cray-cray. The doctor said about antidepressants. Now, before I had been to the doctor, I had started to do a little bit of research, and, a plug for you guys, I started seeing some ads and things on Facebook. And anyone is probably a little bit cautious of what they're going to buy off, a social media site or whatever. But, I really was more interested in the stories, women talking about their issues, whether it is, the menopausal side of things or teenagers or whatever. So I probably had spent about 3 months just really reading all the different information and all the different stories and things like that, and what people were taking for what. And I had done your assessment, which came back as, off the charts severe on every level, which I kind of had already known. Everything is not working. Went to the doctors to see what they had to say, and antidepressants, which I'm not opposed to. And if you need them, I think it's a wonderful thing that you do for yourself if that's what you really need. I didn't feel like I needed them, but I also knew that something wasn't right. I was yelling at my kids a lot. I was, starting to go from that, 0 to 100 again, a little bit feeling irrational, brain fog, all of these different symptoms. So I came back and said to my husband, look, this is the situation. Like, I can either try antidepressants, or we could maybe invest a little bit of money into trying these products. I'll go for 3 months, and if it's not working, not making any difference, can't hurt. It's natural. I did have in the back of my head about, seeing the acupuncturist and, taking all those weird and wacky Chinese herbs. So I thought I'd just give it a go. So I started off with Happy Hormones capsules and the Happy Greens and Happy Turmeric. And I wanted to start quite low. I have a very sensitive stomach.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get any sort of reactions or anything. So I started really, I think I might have just started with the Happy Greens, very low dose. Same with the capsules. Then when I was sort of on the dose that I thought that I should be on, I actually felt worse before I felt better. I felt just a bit.
Which is common. And it's important to sort of say that too, is because a lot of women give up before that.
I think I might have emailed someone and said, look, I'm feeling kind of insane at the moment. I don't really know what's going on. I'm taking the dose that it says. Oh,
but it actually shows that it's working. It's when you don't get any response, which is rare, but that's the body, and the beauty of what we do is it stimulates the body to heal itself and balance itself. So
I must admit, like I really was, I was contemplating on stopping. Like I was feeling pretty ordinary. But
we just, I'll just jump in there with that one because it's an important one. Is we're so conditioned with medicines that to feel better sort of straight away, but really a medicine that's working at a deeper level, it needs to cleanse the system. The body has to go through that process, and we're constantly sort of telling women, just push through that. And when you read through all the reviews and that, all the women that are our really long-term customers say that, just give it time, because your body's it's healing, and you've got to dump those toxins before you can get better, because if that doesn't happen, you won't get better.
But I think often when you're taking, you know, a non-natural product, you take it and you start feeling immediate, you know, effects.
Exactly.
Whereas with natural, it can be a gradual, and this really was. Anyway, I had emailed or Facebooked or something one of your naturopaths and was like, what do I do? I had seen that someone had taken a higher dose of the capsules. I think they was taking 6, and I said, look, I'm going to try this. I've got pretty severe polycystic. This isn't working. I need to try something. Yep. So I started on the 6. I reckon a week later, I felt the best I'd ever felt. And it was like that was the dose. And even now I've tried to drop back and I can't. I need those 3 in the morning, 3 at night. And everything just sort of started to balance itself out. I've started feeling a bit more energetic. I'm a pretty poor sleeper, so I was feeling, you know, more energized, but I just felt level. Like I just, you know, it's hard to explain to people that don't have hormone issues, that you just kind of felt what you think is normal. And that was, I think that was about 2019 that I started, and thank God. Honestly, they have, and you know, I don't want to be sounding like I'm pushing the products or anything, but they really have made such a difference. So I was on them for a good 12 months before I made the decision to go off the pill, because I sort of thought, well, you know, everything else is balancing out. This is sort of the next step, I guess. And then decided to take myself off the pill, and it was a really easy transition. It was really much easier than it had been, you know, throughout previous times in my life when I'd stopped. There was I had no effect, really. I honestly don't think I had any effect. I think because I'd been on it for a decent amount of time first, my body was, you know, ready. So
let me give a little bit of context to actually what you were taking and doing, because our products are really just a small part of that solution. And as you know, a lot of what we do is around the education stuff, and we'll get to the diet and how you made changes there. But the Happy Hormones is just a general broad balancer. So it's a really nice blend of herbs just to kind of get the signal to the body actually through your hormone control center in your brain, which is your pituitary and your hypothalamus. So it signals to the body to start to balance itself. But that alone is part of the solution. It's the Happy Greens particularly, and sometimes the Happy Liver is we're getting, as I talked before, about that hormone metabolism and clearance. Yes. That's a really important thing for PCOS and any sort of chronic condition, getting the body to clear those hormones. And that's where you start to feel that leveling, is as your body starts to metabolize and clear those hormones. Because if you're not doing that, you're getting a recirculation of hormones. So you're not only just getting that one-off effect, but you're getting 2, 3, 4, 5 times that effect of your own hormones and any synthetic hormones you're having. And that's what causes the crazy, if you wanted those moods and everything else.
It
right?
is. It's the crazy, exactly.
Yeah.
No, and so I once I'd sort of built myself up with the happy greens and the happy turmeric, I was then decided that I was going to take a decent amount, because I knew in my head that I wanted to get off the pill and things. So I really wanted my body to be, I was taking about 45 or 50 mil. I've dropped it back a bit now, but because I knew that I needed my body to be working as good as I could get it, I was taking probably, I think it says to take about 45 mil, and I think I was probably taking about 50, 55. I was on the upper level of it, Now I think I take about 30 roughly.
Yeah. And you can do that.
Of each.
Because
it depends on the day, free pouring and whatever. So roughly, I would say.
Yeah.
And I did introduce probably a couple of bottles ago the liver. I thought I would just sort of get not drinking as much. I wanted my body just to, while I've not been really drinking, and we've been in lockdowns, and so we haven't been looking after our body and eating probably the things that we should. I started taking happy liver, and I saw a bit of an effect when I started taking it. Just feeling a bit yucky, but feeling good now. So
now just quickly on those ones, the happy greens and turmeric. The other part, you don't need to continue to take the higher dose, because it's the live probiotics in there which over time they build up in the system, and they have a huge your microbiome. There's lots of bacteria in your digestive system that help to metabolize those hormones. So once that balances out, and that's why sometimes you feel worse to begin with, because there's this little war going on in your digestive tract trying to clear out those nasty bugs, and the good ones starting to take hold.
Which probably has helped me. I used to have to take Nexium quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
Always just had a sluggish digestive. So that might have, I rarely take that either anymore, very rarely. So possibly that's really helped with all of that too.
No, for sure. Now, you did mention you made some dietary changes. For the ladies that are listening, the key things with PCOS are dairy. There's a lot of studies that show dairy makes it worse. Gluten is another one if you can restrict gluten, and generally sort of animal products, because they contain growth promotants, not hormones, but growth promotants, and that can disrupt your endocrine system. So those are the three things in terms of dietary. And then the big one, and you would have read about this, is limiting the sugar intake. So trying to
all the good stuff, isn't it? Look, as I said earlier, I will forever be battling my weight. I have been up and down 100 times. Probably around when I started your products, I was already sort of on a bit of a health kick anyway, and I think that that's probably why I went down the natural versus, the non-natural way. I was really determined for my 40th to lose a whole heap of weight and be the best that I could be. So I had really restricted a lot of things and was really eating super, super clean. Then COVID happened. So things got a bit iffy there, but look, I definitely know all the things that I should be doing, whether I, am in complete harmony with all of those things. I know that I don't have a lot of dairy, but I do love my coffee, and that's probably my biggest, war that I'm doing. I like normal milk in my coffee, but my son is gluten intolerant, so we eat completely gluten-free for dinner, and I've just sort of gone back off the bread, back off, the cereals. I'm trying to have more like smoothies and things like that as my breakfast. And as I said, if you want to do it, you just have to be aware of what you're putting into your body. You need to know, again, this is education. If you kind of eat like a diabetic, you're going to probably see more results than if you're eating, things that are carb heavy, sugar heavy, all of those things. Stick with your fruits, your veggies, all the I say everything in moderation. That's my theory. But look, definitely, I think when you're learning about polycystic, you really do have to look at that whole side of things, really in conjunction with everything else that you're doing. Because if you're not putting the right things in your body is not working well. We already know we struggle with our weight, most of us, which again then has all its own other issues. So I think if you can try and do everything, together. But in saying this, life is worth living as well. So, you've got to balance it all.
Exactly. But it's about understanding at that degree. And I think when you first get started on this journey, doing something for 3 months, like taking baby steps, but something like our 8-week program, which is free and anyone can do that. So it just gives you a bit of structure and you learn. But you're exactly right, I generally work on that 80-20 rule. So if you're doing things 80% of the rule, but you've got to get to that point where you can do that first. So you're in a fairly good space at the moment. Whereas
maybe if you're 20, you're not going to be necessarily in that space. And even if younger than that, if you're working at home, you know, your parents have to be on board too. At least with your sites and things, you have everything there for parents and teens and whoever to find all the information. You know, it's not just about polycystic, but you've got, you know, as you said, the 8-week, you've got so much information and all the wonderful women that are on there that are happy to talk about everything so openly too. You know, I think it's really important that, you know, you read everything and it's a great spot to learn. Yeah.
And it's just striking that balance, as you said. You've got to still live and enjoy your life.
You do.
Sometimes though, just with those certain things, like for example, sugar is just changing that association from this is what makes me feel good to actually this is what's making me feel bad. So
exactly,
that contextually can help as well.
And the 5-minute high of having your sugar is not necessarily, you know, worthwhile.
But maybe you mentioned before sleep's an issue for you. So maybe looking at cutting the coffee, because I know myself, if coffee is a big no-no, if I won't well.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I have little kids. Can we blame it on that? Look, I definitely have readjusted how I have it. I don't have it past 12 o'clock anymore because I know that, you know, it really affects me. And look, I only have 2.
Okay.
Maybe that 1 too many. I have cut it right back. Yes, that is something we will work on as well.
I've only just learned a few days ago, actually, there's a company called the Swiss Water Coffee Company, and they do a decaf but without the chemicals, so that's something to look at as well.
I have a lifetime in hospitality. They do it the right way, those people, don't they? They don't use chemicals or anything like that. So yes. All right, next time we chat, that will be sleep's so critical. It's so important,
the pillar stone. And now everything I do in my health and well-being, it sounds strange, during the day is geared towards me making sure I get a good night's sleep, because everything you do during the day does that. So think about that a little.
I will. I have look. I'm a work in process. You know, like progress. It's been a long journey. I'm pretty au naturel now with everything. So yeah, look, as I said, my diet is also, it's a thing that I will probably forever battle. Some months we are better than others, and you know, I just need to get a little bit more strict on myself. But I will say,
I wouldn't say strict.
One thing. No, just probably making some better choices, you know. So, you know, I know everything that I need to do inside and out. But I think often, you know, the tide factor maybe gets in the way of making some better choices. Yeah. But we're actually, as a family, we're all definitely, you know, on COVID and being at home, we all made some really poor choices. Mum was making a lot of poor dietary choices. And so we all knew that come this year, we all really had to reassess what we were eating, you know, back into school lunches. So, you know, their school lunches are super, super healthy. So, you know, maybe I need to make myself a lunchbox too. Who knows? But I did want to say about when I was on Happy Hormones, because I had said to the family, right, you know, I'm going to do this for 3 months and hopefully, you know, the nice mum is back and all of those things. My son, after 3 months, I sat with the family and said, right, you know, it's been 3 months. Have you seen a difference? And I knew that I had been pretty full on. So that's why we had, you know, started looking into what I needed to do. And my son, you know, really dead serious, was like, you can never stop taking Happy Hormones ever. So I knew that it was obviously working or having an effect, that he had seen such a huge change in my behavior or my emotional state. So yeah, anyway.
Nicole, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could keep chatting to you for hours.
I know, I'm sorry. I talk too much. It's my fault.
It's been fabulous. I've loved it, and I loved your enthusiasm despite everything you've been through. And I'm I've got to congratulate you on where you've got to now, and I can see lots of wonderful things because it's a journey, and you're learning yourself. We're giving you some tools as well, so it's a really
don't stop doing what you're doing. We need you. We need people like you to really care about women's health, and you know, it's been life-changing for me. I have, as I said earlier, I think I said to you that, you know, often when I'm talking with my friends, I will throw it in there and say, oh, you know, maybe you should try this. So thank you very much. Really appreciate that you've done this for so many women, and hopefully the message gets out there to everyone that's got polycystic, or not just that, hormonal issues in general.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for being such a great advocate for us. And hopefully, even if it's one young woman can learn from your story, then it's been time well spent.
Worth it. Well done. Thank you. Bye, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Bye, Nicole.
Bye.
So I hope you enjoyed this episode of My Story. If you've got an interesting story that you'd like to tell to empower other women to make changes in their lifestyle and manage their hormones naturally, then reach out to us, and we'd love to hear your story, and we can have a chat about that. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with your family and friends, because the whole point of this podcast series is to talk about hormones, empower other women, and demystify hormonal imbalances, which currently are just not being spoken about in society. So please share, please like and follow us, and we look forward to you enjoying more of this series.